This version of Alice in Wonderland was much denser than the first version here. Alice also falls down a rabbit hole but enters into a desolate and devastated world by the tyranny of a queen who believes that it is better to be feared than loved. If she wants to get out of here alive, she must face the Jabberwocky, a fearsome creature which in reality symbolizes something she has not been able to confront in the real world, a battle that possibly many of us have not yet won. While Alice's father has an important business conversation, the little girl interrupts him because she has been having nightmares. Her father drops everything to listen to her. Alice tells him that she has had a recurring nightmare again, one in which she falls down a hole until she reaches a strange world full of fantastic landscapes and talking animals. The girl asks her father if he thinks she is crazy. He replies that she has lost her head but also tenderly shares a secret: the best people are crazy. Alice smiles and her father reassures her by saying that in dreams nothing can hurt her and that if she is very scared, a pinch is always enough to wake up. Years pass, and now Alice is a young girl of 9 years. Unfortunately, her father has died, and now she is left alone with her mother with whom she goes to a party. The woman scolds her daughter for not wearing a corset or stockings, since it is not the proper way to dress. Finally, mother and daughter arrive at the party. Although they are late, they are received by Lady and Lord Ascot. Lady Ascot is extremely angry about their delay and tells Alice that her son Hamish is waiting for her to dance, and she obeys. Alice does not know it, but this day is very important for her because at last a man will ask for her hand. The problem is that this man is somewhat pathetic. He is boring, constantly correcting Alice, and the girl does not find him particularly attractive. Alice tries to share with him her crazy thoughts such as that she has imagined men in dresses or tried to imagine what it feels like to fly, but Hamish tells her that it is absurd to imagine impossible things. Alice comments, "My father used to think of 6 impossible things before breakfast," and Hamish, better than that, tells her that she is falling a bit. He asks that they meet at the Costco in 10 minutes and then immediately leaves. Two twins approach Alice and reveal the shocking news that Hamish will propose marriage to her. At that moment, Alice's sister Margaret appears and tells her little sister that this whole party is actually to celebrate her engagement, and that the celebrations are even prepared for when Alice says she accepts to be his wife. Alice stops her sister and comments that it is not something she wants, but her sister reminds her that her future depends on it. The older she gets, the harder it will be to find a husband, and if she does not marry, she will end up like her old and lonely aunt. At that moment, Lady Ascot calls Alice for a private walk in her rose garden. These should be red roses, but the gardeners made a mistake and planted the wrong ones. She also tells her all the care that her son, that is, Alice's future husband, needs. At that moment, the girl's attention is stolen by a white rabbit. The hour of the marriage proposal finally arrives at the Costco. Everyone watches Alice while Hamish kneels before her. Alice removes a blue caterpillar from her shoulder, and after this, the boy asks her to be his wife. In that moment, the world freezes. Alice looks at Hamish, looks at the hundreds of people waiting for her to say yes, and at her aunt, a picture of the future that awaits her, and says no. Despite this pressure, she stops for a moment and tells everyone that she needs a second, and at that moment a white rabbit peeks out from a corner pointing at a clock. Alice finishes the phrase "I need a second" and then flees after chasing the rabbit, leaving Hamish kneeling at the kiosko. The chase of the rabbit ends in a rabbit hole where, by accident, Alice falls through a gigantic hole full of strange objects like books and pianos, just as in the nightmares that have tormented her since childhood. A long time ago, I did an analysis of the film Alice in Wonderland, but of the 1951 version, where I focused on the perspective of Alice's transition from childhood to adulthood. However, this 2010 film has different elements that warrant a different analysis, so as not to be repetitive. Therefore, I recommend that after this video you go watch the other one, which I am sure you will also like, and now let us continue with this analysis. Alice is about to enter a fantastic world, but although it seems completely alien, it preserves many similarities with the reality she sees throughout this experience. We are going to see how the conflicts that Alice will face in this fantastic world reflect the problems she left behind in her real life, so from now on each challenge and decision will push her to find the answers she needs to take control of her life. Alice lands in a strange hall surrounded by doors and a key on a table, a key that can open only one very small door through which she cannot pass. After investigating, she takes a potion that makes her small and a cake that makes her grow, alternating between both until she reaches the adequate size to pass through the door. Beyond this magical door, Alice discovers a fantastic, desolate world with nature that she had never seen before, a world practically identical to the nightmare that visited her each night. After walking a few meters, she is greeted by two twins, the white rabbit, and a dormouse who debate whether this Alice is the correct or incorrect Alice. Well, we will know that later. To know if she is the correct one, the inhabitants of this world take Alice to Absalom the Wise. This is a caterpillar who possesses an oracle. This is a scroll that holds all the history of Inferteria, the place where the prophecy is basically found. It says that the correct Alice will arrive to face the fearsome Uwawaki on the fabulous day when the reign of the Red Queen will end. The correct Alice will have to use the boar pica sword to kill the beast, and after this she will be able to return home. But upon seeing this bloody ending, Alice says that she is not the person they are looking for. The wise caterpillar exclaims that she is not even close to being the correct one and disappears in the smoke. As a small preview, the Joy is a monstrous creature, and only by drinking its blood can Alice choose between returning to Earth or staying here. But for the purposes of this analysis, we will also see this creature as the representation of everything that Alice fears to face in her real life, the expectations, the fears, and the impositions that paralyze her. In fact, her resistance to accept that she is the correct Alice reflects her inner struggle to want to be herself. Hold on to this because it will be important. The girl decides that she has had enough, so she pinches her arm, but she does not wake up, and before she can do anything else, a ferocious beast called the Bandersnatch along with the Red Queen's soldiers burst into the place and begin capturing the creatures of the forest. The Dormouse rescues Alice and removes one eye from the monster, which scratches the girl from this encounter. The Queen's army captures the dodo, the rabbit, and a giant bird also takes away that wins. When the chaos ends, Stein, the commander and lover of the Red Queen, takes possession of the oracle and then leaves for the castle. We then see the true cruelty of the Queen. Not only does she treat her subjects with contempt, but she is also cruel. After discovering that one of them ate her cake simply because he was hungry, she orders his head to be chopped off and has his wife and children brought in order to give them an equally terrible end. In addition to this, the furniture and adornments of her castle are made from the suffering of her subjects, since those who support it are living animals, something that could perfectly be done with wooden legs, but the Queen enjoys watching others suffer. The world that we have seen, Inferteria, is, in the following way, a world divided and dominated by the tyranny of the Red Queen. After overthrowing her sister, the White Queen, in the past, under the reign of the White Queen, the place was peaceful and harmonious, but now oppression reigns. The Red Queen is explosive, cruel, and has a constant need to impose her will, something that is noticeable in every decision she makes and in how she treats others. She governs with fear and repression, and does things like using living animals as furniture just to demonstrate her absolute power. She does not tolerate disobedience and responds with exaggerated punishments, such as ordering someone to be beheaded for anything. This may be due to some traumas in her past that have resulted in this woman having something called an inferiority complex, but we will talk more about that later. At that moment, her dear Stein arrives and shows her the oracle, where it is seen that in a few days Alice will eliminate her pet, the Jabberwocky, a fierce and powerful weapon with which she fights wars. Fearing that her pet will die and that her throne will be endangered, she orders Stein and his army to go find and behead Alice before the prophecy can be fulfilled. Among the Queen's ranks is a hound called Bayard, to whom they promise that if he finds Alice, both he and his family will be freed, a promise that, by the way, the Queen does not plan to keep. Meanwhile, Alice walks through a dark forest where she is found by the Cheshire Cat, who warns her that the wound on her arm caused by the Bandersnatch will rot unless it is tended to. Alice tells him that the only thing she wants is to wake up from that dream, so the cat offers to take her to the Hare in the Hat. They walk for a while until they arrive at an old mill where there is a large and ruined tea table. When the hat sees Alice arriving, its eyes light up, and it walks onto the table until it kneels before her. At the tea party there are also the hare, the cat, and the mouse, who tells the Hatter that she is not the real Alice, but the Hatter insists that she is, clarifying that he could recognize the true Alice wherever she might be. The Hatter invites Alice to continue her tea party, for they have been waiting for her since she left. However, before the party can continue, the Red Queen's army arrives. The Hatter shrinks Alice and hides her in a teapot while Stein interrogates them. The hound searches under the table until he finds that Alice is inside the teapot, but before he can reveal it, the Hatter whispers the Great Redhead to him, and with that, the dog leads the soldiers elsewhere. The Hatter escapes with Alice, and while they walk, he begins reciting a poem with some invented, nonsensical words, but broadly speaking, it speaks of how on the fabulous day, Alice will end the life of the Jabberwocky. She denies being who everyone is searching for and makes it clear to the Hatter that she will not kill anything. The Hatter is indignant. He tells her that she is not even half of what she was the first time she was in this world and recounts the terrible day when everything changed. He explains that he used to be the Hatter of the White Queen when Inferteria was at peace and harmony thanks to the White Queen's reign, but one bad day the Red Queen decided to attack with her army and seize power over Inferteria. The Hatter lost his head, and the chaotic Wonderland was subjected to fear and repression. What does the Hatter mean when he tells Alice that she is not even half of what she was the first time she came? Well, he tells her that because Alice had already been in the smaller Inferteria, only she remembers it as if it had been one of her nightmares. Look at the Alice who arrived for the first time in Inferteria, a child, indeed. That experience as a child could be seen like that of the 1951 film, and as a child, Alice did not know the restrictions of adulthood. At that time, Alice did not hesitate to imagine impossible things and believe that the world could be different. Now, as an adult, Alice has been molded by an environment that tells her how to behave, what to think, and what to expect from life. That is why Alice does not believe she can face the beast, or in other words, she does not believe she can challenge the established order and take another path than the one imposed by her surroundings. The story continues when both hear the soldiers of the Red Queen approaching through the forest, so they try to escape. The problem is that they are surrounded from behind and in front there is a lake that the Hatter cannot cross. Because of this, he puts little Alice on his hat and launches her over the lake, thereby saving her, although he surrenders to the fearsome army of the Red Queen. It is a sacrifice he makes because he knows that Alice, his Alice, is special. Not knowing what to do, the young girl hides under the hat and sleeps. The next morning, Bayard finds her. The dog explains that the Hatter has been taken to the Red Queen's castle and advises Alice to prepare to face the Jabberwocky, but she wants to rescue her friend Beard. He explains that this is not in the oracle and is not the intended path. Fed up, Alice exclaims that she does not care. Since she fell down the rabbit hole, she has been told what to do and who she must be, has been shrunk, stretched, and accused of being Alice and not being her, but she is already tired. She declares that this is her dream and that she will not deviate from the path because she is the one who makes her own way. The dog understands and lets Alice climb onto his back to head to the Red Queen's castle. Here we see for the first time that Alice takes control and decides to face the challenges on her own terms. Although she has not yet fully accepted her ability to face the impossible, little by little she is beginning to take control. Upon arriving at the castle, Alice infiltrates a garden and observes how the Red Queen, celebrated by her subjects, plays golf using animals as clubs. Alice is found by the White Rabbit, who gives her a piece of cake to enlarge herself. However, she becomes giant, drawing the attention of the Queen and all her subjects. Alice notices that all the Queen's sycophants have something in common. Some part of their body is disproportionately large. One has an enormous nose, one woman has gigantic breasts, another man has a colossal double chin, and the Queen, of course, has an immense head. Taking advantage of this, Alice flatters the Queen to please her, and even lies about her identity so as not to be discovered. These tactics work, and the Queen orders her to have a new dress made and seats her beside her in court. With the fact that she only surrounds herself with people with disproportionate physical attributes, we can realize that a great insecurity of the Queen is her physical appearance, one that may have been exacerbated since her childhood. Knowing this, we can understand that she chooses to surround herself with such people so that she feels less alone in her difference and superior in her extravagance. Now the film does not give us much context of the Queen's past, but we can infer that perhaps in her past she might have felt belittled in comparison to her sister, the White Queen. The White Queen is everything she is not: kind, accepted by everyone, and even the younger one. With this in mind, it is easy to imagine how that feeling of inferiority grew over the years, and it is that same inferiority complex that has caused her to take it out on others in the real world. Some people try to overcome their sense of inferiority by excessively striving to stand out in other areas, often in extreme ways, but this insecurity can also transform into behaviors such as arrogance, contempt for others, and even cruelty, an attempt to hide one's own vulnerabilities. The Red Queen, by mistreating others, is projecting her inner pain outward and creates an illusion of control and superiority. Her logic is simple but very destructive: if she can make others feel small, then she will not feel so small herself. The Red Queen calls the Hatter to interrogate him about Alice's whereabouts. However, the Hatter flatters her enormous head and manages to convince her to let him work for her. Meanwhile, Bayard arrives at the White Queen's castle and informs her that Alice is in the Red Queen's castle. The White Queen does not worry since she knows that that is where Alice will find the VRP sword. That night, the Red Queen contemplates her river of human heads, among which is that of her ex-husband, assuring that she no longer needs him. While embracing Stein, with whom she is now in love, she chats with him, asking why everyone prefers her sister instead of her, and she questions whether it is better to be feared than loved, But is it really so? On one hand, being feared gives her absolute control. Fear can guarantee obedience, eliminate questioning, and impose her will without resistance. From this perspective, fear seems to be an effective tool to maintain order, giving her a form of power that does not depend on the emotional acceptance of others, something she might feel is unreachable otherwise. On the other hand, being loved has its own advantages. People who love their leader act on their own will, not out of coercion, and that creates a more stable and harmonious realm. Being loved could mean that her subjects follow her because they trust her, because they respect her, and not because they fear the consequences of disobedience. The question that arises is, can fear replace love, or is it only an incomplete substitute? A question that we will answer in the final battle of this story. Meanwhile, the White Rabbit takes advantage of the Queen being distracted to steal the oracle. Later, Alice meets the Hatter, who is happy to be back working on what he loves, but this joy turns to anger when he remembers what kind of person he is working for. Alice calms him, and he asks if she has lost her head. She replies that indeed she has gone mad, but she tells him a secret: the best people are crazy. After this, Alice goes to where the Bandersnatch is so as to recover the boar pica sword. The girl uses the eye that the dormouse had torn from the beast as an offering to get closer. However, before taking the sword, her wound worsens and she loses consciousness. Meanwhile, the Hatter watches as a woman's false nose falls off, revealing that all those around the Red Queen pretend to have something disproportionate in order to please her. The dilemma between being feared or being loved has just tilted toward a possible answer. The revelation of these lies unmasks that fear does not generate genuine connections, but rather relationships based on appearances and convenience. At that moment, a subject informs the Queen about an incident between Alice and Stein, which makes her explode in rage. The next day, Alice awakens under the gaze of the Bandersnatch. Grateful for what she did for him, he allows her to open the sword's chest and cures her wound with his tongue. Now that she has the sword, Alice sets out to rescue the Hatter. At the same time, Stein assures the Red Queen that it was the girl under a false name who tried to seduce him. Furious, the Queen orders the girl's immediate execution. Meanwhile, Alice arrives at the castle to rescue the Hatter but is intercepted by Stein. Her friend struggles to defend her, but everything stops when the mouse accidentally reveals that Alice is the real Alice. Upon hearing this, Stein halts the confrontation. Alice tries to flee, but she is cornered by red guards. However, the Bandersnatch appears, takes Alice's side, defeats several guards, and manages to save her. Stein informs the Red Queen that Alice has escaped with the boar sword and with the Bandersnatch. Although at first she seems to maintain her composure, the Queen, full of fury, orders the immediate execution of the Hatter and the mouse. For his part, Alice arrives at the White Queen's castle and hands over the boar sword. After this, the White Queen prepares a potion that returns Alice to her normal size. She also informs her that someone wishes to speak with her. Alice goes out into the garden, where she meets Absalom the Caterpillar, who tells her that before she was not even close to being the real Alice, but now she is much closer to becoming who she truly is. He also warns her that she will soon have to face the Jabberwocky since her life will depend on it. With these words, Absalom disappears in his characteristic smoke. The moment of the Hatter's execution arrives. He walks up to the execution block and kneels, prepared for his fate. However, when the axe falls, the Hatter vanishes. It is the Cheshire Cat who saves him at the last moment by using his ability to vanish safely. The Hatter incites the castle's subjects to rebel against the Red Queen, who in response releases her giant bird to sow terror and suppress the rebellion while she watches the chaos from above. She states with conviction that it is better to be feared than loved. In the midst of the tumult, the Red Queen declares that the time has come to visit her sister back at the castle, the White Queen. Alice observes the Hatter's arrival along with the freed prisoners. The Hound Bayard is reunited with his family, and the Hatter shares an intimate conversation with Alice. She confesses that she still believes that everything is a dream, but he replies with a smile, "You must be half crazy to imagine someone like me." The next morning, the Frabulous Day begins. A champion must face the Jabberwocky. Although many characters volunteer, the Oracle confirms that Alice is the only one who can fulfill the prophecy. The White Queen caresses her and tells her deep words, "You cannot live to please others, the decision must be yours because when you face that creature, you will be alone ultimately. You are the one who bears the consequences of your decisions, you alone live your life, therefore, make sure that the decisions you take are yours, because in the end it will be you who faces the consequences, the victories, the defeats, and who carries the story you build." At that moment, Alice finds herself in a situation very similar to that of a few days ago when everyone at the Costco was waiting for her to respond to the man who was asking for her hand. Once again, overwhelmed by expectations, she decides to flee. After distancing herself from everyone, she meets Absalom, who is in the process of transforming from a caterpillar into a butterfly. Through tears, Alice asks him for advice, but Absalom replies that he cannot help her without even knowing who she is. This leads Alice to reflect on what defines her: her name, her mother's name, the place where she was born, and her father's name, a visionary man. The caterpillar rejoices upon seeing that Alice has finally understood and tells her that she was just as naive the first time she came in. Hearing this, Alice remembers the adventures of her childhood and realizes that her nightmares were, in fact, memories from before she entered her cocoon. Absalom welcomes her back and tells her that the sword will guide her, all she needs to do is hold on to it securely. Both armies begin preparing to march to war. The White Queen soldiers doubt that Alice will participate, but the girl surprises them with a triumphant entrance. She rides on the Bandersnatch, wears a resplendent suit of armor, and carries the boar sword in her hand. Before the two armies face each other in the arena, the two queens approach to talk before sending their champions to fight. The White Queen tries to convince her sister not to fight, but the Red Queen's jealousy overflows. She declares furiously that the tactics of persuasion that worked with their parents will not work now. She is enraged, shouting that she is the eldest and therefore the crown belongs to her. After her outburst, she calls the Jabberwocky. From the depths of the forest emerges a gigantic creature resembling a dragon. It is skeletal with large pierced wings, sharp fangs, and a snake-like tongue. Alice whispers to the Hatter that defeating the Jabberwocky seems impossible, but the Hatter replies that it is only impossible if she believes it so. Thus, while her destiny approaches, Alice remembers how her father could think of 6 impossible things before breakfast and decides to replicate him. The deathmatch begins. Alice fights while enumerating impossible things to herself. 1. The existence of Wonderland. 2. A cake that makes you grow. 3. A potion that makes you shrink. 4. A tea party where time stands still. 5. A world governed by nonsense. And 6. The Jabberwocky spreads its wings to threaten her, but Alice seizes the moment to cut off its tongue. She continues enumerating impossible things until she finally reaches number 6, and that final impossible thing is to kill the Jabberwocky. The fight is intense and for moments the beast seems to dominate Alice. The battle escalates even more when both armies decide to begin fighting each other, including the Hatter who joins the chaos after retrieving the sword. Alice climbs a tower and ends up riding on the neck of the Jabberwocky. While the creature thrashes about, Alice clings with all her strength. The situation seems critical until, in a skillful move, she leaps into the air and swings the blade of her sword over the creature's neck. Its head rolls aside and the body falls into the void, putting an end to the strongest piece of the Red Queen's army. The battle stops. Although the Red Queen orders her army to keep fighting, her soldiers decide that they will no longer be loyal to her and throw down their weapons. The crown finally returns to the White Queen. As punishment for her crimes, the White Queen condemns the Red Queen to exile along with Stein. Upon hearing that he will have to spend years tied to the Red Queen, Stein tries to end her life, albeit without success. In fact, Stein even begs that they end his existence rather than spending the rest of his days with the Red Queen, but the White Queen is not so cruel as to grant that wish. With the fall of the Jabberwocky, the Red Queen's power ended. Her army, which obeyed her unquestioningly, stopped doing so because that obedience was inspired by the fear that the creature caused, a situation that shows us that the fear upon which her reign was built was an illusion, strong in appearance but extremely fragile in essence. Fear can force people to follow you, but it never unites them to you in a genuine way. It is a tool that generates momentary obedience but lacks the solid foundations that come from respect and love. With this, the Red Queen's end answers the question that defined her story: is it better to be loved than feared? Because while fear disappears with the fall of that which supports it, love remains rooted in trust, respect, and affection. Now that the Great Red Head has been overthrown, the Hatter celebrates with a peculiar and joyful dance. Later, the White Queen takes some of the Jai's blood and hands it to Alice, explaining that if she wishes, she can use it to return home. This breaks the Hatter's heart a little, who suggests that Alice could stay in this world. Although it seems like a great idea to her, she affirms that she has things to discover in her own home. The Jabberwocky, beyond being an imposing and terrifying creature, symbolizes the final and decisive act of Alice in taking control of her life. Let us recall that this represents everything that has paralyzed her until now: the imposed expectations, the fear of defying the established order, and the belief that she cannot change social impositions. That is why this moment is very symbolic, for only by facing it and cutting off its head does Alice obtain the power to decide whether to stay or not. In other words, the symbolic power to decide her own destiny. Both say goodbye affectionately. Alice returns to her world, where it seems that time has not moved. She runs back to the Costco where Hamish continues complaining about what happened, surprising everyone with his determination. Alice apologizes and announces that she will not marry Hamish. Then she tells her sister that this is her life and that she will be the one who decides what to do with it. Afterward, she faces the people who at the beginning of the party criticized or bothered her, putting them firmly in their place. She assures her mother that she will be fine because she will find something useful to do with her life. Finally, she goes to one of her father's former partners, a man who bought his business long ago. They talk about the impossible dreams her father had for the company and decide to work together to fulfill them. Sometime later, Alice boards a ship called Maravilla, ready to explore the world and do business. Finally, the glances she finds when she looks back are not of expectation nor of pride. Moments later, she sees Absalom now transformed into a beautiful butterfly, a symbol of Alice's transformation into a better version. It perches on her shoulder, and Alice's new adventure begins. Many times, those who do not conform to the rules, to the status quo, who choose to follow their own path, are often called crazy. One of the central themes of this story is madness, something that at the end of it all, Alice manages to embrace, but it is not something clinical or a disconnection from reality, nor a return to childish chaos. Rather, it is the recovery of the ability to imagine, to defy, and to create one's own path. When Alice returns to the real world, she does so transformed. She is no longer the young girl who doubted her ability to decide and who feared others' expectations. Now she is someone who understands that this kind of madness is not a defect but the tool that allows her to live authentically, to refuse to marry Hamish, to choose her own path, to defy social norms, and to choose to live her life on her own terms. It was her greatest act of madness and at the same time her clearest act of lucidity. For you who have come all the way to the end, thank you very much for watching the complete video. I also want to thank you for all your support and remind you that if you have not subscribed to my channel, do so right now. Honestly, you would be supporting me a lot, and you would also make sure not to miss any of my videos. Without further ado, you and I will see each other in the next video.